Hello and welcome back to the Real Music Talks. Today's guest is Amo from the Phat Jammerz, based in Birmingham, UK. How you doing, man?
How you doing? All good here. Very good over here. Sun's out. Can't complain.
I know in this country it's quite a rare thing, and it's literally
Rare
like a
thing.
summer's day out there, so it's
Probably start
lovely.
probably start snowing in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. So for people that have never heard of you before, that are listening, how would you describe yourself and your involvement in music?
So from an early age, I was, I think I've mentioned this in on another interview. I was always surrounded by music growing up. So my dad used to run a record label and was involved in a world music band. From a very young age, I grew up around music. So I think it was almost inevitable I was gonna, go down a path where I either make or create my own sort of music, because it was in my blood from an early age.
And when did you first like pick it up as an interest? Like what was your first instrument, perhaps? What was the first thing that you kind of encountered that made you think, I want to start creating music rather than just listening to it?
Okay, so there was I'll give the short answer here. So like I said, my dad used to play in a band, and I used to go with him just get out the house, get away from doing house chores, no tidying the kitchen, all that. So like, Dad, let me come with you, sit in the van. All right, so we're with other musicians, and I just used to love the crack. From a 10 years old, all the giggles going on, all the banter, I used to love it all. And I specifically remember one gig. I was sat by my dad who's playing percussion, so he'd be on the back line next to the drummer and the bass player, so I could have like a little like a good view of what was going on. And it was it was like Asian music, fusion Bhangra music, which is from North India, fusion between Bhangra and Western music, with keyboards, bass guitars, drum kits. I just saw the crowd go electric, and an interest just sparked to me. I was like, wow, it's amazing the effect of music can have. And bearing in mind, these people didn't understand what the singer was singing. It was in a foreign language. I mean, they had no idea what it was on about, but they were jamming as if they understood every word. I was just hooked from then. I was like, man, I want to learn something about this. This is almost like it's like black magic. This is. So I remember on the way back, I said to my dad, I go, I think I want to learn an instrument. And he's like, really? Because at this point, I never really, I was too busy playing with Spider-Man and Batman. And then he goes, all right then. So he bought me a little percussion instrument called a dhol, right, which is a North Indian drum folk style. He goes, okay, practice this for about a year. So I practiced it for about a year. And I said to him, Dad, I think I'm ready just to do, just like 10 minutes on stage. He goes, mate, you're having a laugh. It took me, 10 years to get good enough to get on stage. You want to do it after a year? You're having a laugh. I was like, I reckon I can do it. All right. So he put me on. He goes, all right, you can have a 10-minute slot with us. You're going to come on, 10 minutes, have a little play. That's what I did. I went on, 10 years old. I think I was 11 actually, having practiced about 1 year. I went on stage and I loved it. I loved the like electricity, the adrenaline dump, everything. You just couldn't top it. So I continued to play in my dad's band for a while, which was mainly, Bhangra and fusion music. But then that band started to slow down a bit. Right, it started to slow. The gigs started to slow down, and I recently joined university. So obviously 10 years had passed. I was about 21 now, and I'd joined university. And the only instrument at that point I could play was that North Indian drum. So it's going to be hard to get into any bands at university when all you can play is a Bhangra drum, right? There's punk bands going on, there's classic, big band going on, and you just turn up with your folk instrument. I was like, mate, that don't fit in here. But I was like, I still want to play music. I still want to play music. So then I went to the union and I just saw like a little advert for they're looking for a drummer. This little indie band. And bearing in mind, I never owned a drum kit. I never played on a drum kit. But I thought, I'm just gonna give it a go. So I emailed the guy, said, yeah, I'm a drummer. I'll see you at this practice room, blah, 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 blah. So I'm a fucking chancer, right? I just, you know what I mean? I had no right going to that room, absolutely zero right going to that room. I don't even know, what a snare. I don't even know how to set up cymbals or a hi hat or nothing, right? And I'm meant to be the drummer. So I walk in, and they're like, mate, yeah, you're sound. Oh, the drum kit's over there. I was like, fuck, I'm gonna have to blag this now because I have no idea how to set it up. I was like, what the? So I'm there Googling on my phone how to set up a hi hat. Just, rest about, boom, 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 boom. And they go, okay, we're gonna play this tune now. I was like, okay, I never heard the tune before. And instinctively, I managed just to get through that session, just four fours, just barely, but even though you could sense I'm like this guy can't fully play. Do you know what I mean? Like I was bluffing it slightly. So anyway, they couldn't find another drummer, so I stuck with them. And then when I was with them, I was listening to music that I'd never really heard before. So they go, "Oh, learn this tune for next week," and eventually, my musical knowledge sort of went. And then, like I said before, I was very interested. It was always like in the back of my head, I want to make my own tune. And then we in that band started writing a few independent tunes, and I started to slowly get involved as the drummer. You stay in the back, stay in the back, stay in the back. But I was like, okay, let me. Here's a few ideas, and that was the point I realized I got a potential to actually like write songs. I never saw myself as a songwriter. But that was the first glimpse that I could write a song. So from there, I left the that student band, finished uni, whatnot. And now it's time to start my own project. And then hence I started the Phat Jammerz. I met Brendan Hill at an open mic night when I was performing my university band, and I approached him, very good singer, and I go, "Listen, I'm trying to start my own thing. I'm looking for a singer. Would you be interested?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." So a few months later, I was working on some stuff at home, coming up with ideas, lyrics, riffs. And I eventually contacted him. I said, "Listen, I've got some songs. Should we go and work on them? I'm looking for a singer." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, awesome." So we met up at the studio, and before you know it, there was a debut album there, 11 songs or 12 songs or whatever, and the rest is history, really.
Wow, that's crazy to go from that place that you started to there. And
Yeah,
not many people that I speak to like are thrown in the deep end like that. How was that? Because obviously, you didn't have like the technical skills and the
exactly.
musical training behind it. So how did you actually kind of grow as a musician? Was it more developing your ear, if that
Yeah,
makes sense, and hone your
yeah, yeah,
craft
yeah,
that way?
yeah. So, like I've said before, I was never, even to this day, I'm not a great technical musician. Technically, I'm not great. If I'm in the band, I'd be the weakest link. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like, there's something. If there's one geezer dispensable here, it's him over there. Do you know what I mean? But what I realized, particularly with the production and composing and the songwriting, the lyrics, is that my strength comes more from creativity. So I might not be a fantastic musician, but I've got the ideas, the creativity. It's a bit like saying, if you're good at literature, you don't need a really big vocabulary to write a good story. I think it's similar in music. I mean, you can know a few basic chords, but and then you don't like if you look at majority of the top best songs, there's nothing mad going on. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing really that mental going on. They're all kind of using the same sort of chords, the same sort of structures. They're just doing it in their own sort of style, change it slightly. But that's when I realized you don't really have to be a great musician to be a good songwriter, or it certainly helps. Don't get me wrong, it certainly helps. So, as I was writing and producing, my knowledge went up. I learned about, sus chords, jazz chords, you know what I mean? That's only because I literally threw myself in the deep end. So before you know it, I had a whole album and I had to try and like make it sound different. Okay, how can I make that do different chords? Boom, 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 boom. See, I'm not the type of guy that can learn here's a scale and practice for 10 hours. I get bored. But I learn music through the process of creativity. So if someone says, I'll learn scales. So I'll learn a G minor scale. Instead of practicing G minor, I'll make a composition using only G minor. And now I know G minor inside out, but through a different way. That makes sense. Using my strengths as creativity, opposed to being a really good technical musician, and, playing Jimi Hendrix at 10,000 miles an hour. That's not going to be me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the kind of like the relationship between the elements in the music almost, rather than
Yeah.
the pure technical ability of the scale.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, if you've got higher level of technical ability, then you can be more creative. But at the
Yeah.
same time, when I speak to people on here, I do find this, sometimes it can limit your creativity because you're always
100%.
trying to make what you create fit into those boxes of this is the correct scale to play, or this is the
Yeah.
correct
Yeah.
chord sequence for this. But actually, when you don't have that, it's somewhat easier to be creative because there's no limits to what you can think of and what you can actually make in terms of the
Yeah.
sounds and the soundscapes that you build up. So, yeah, how has that developed over time, would you
Yeah.
say?
So for me, if anything, I was probably a bit more the reverse. I was always paranoid. Is that in key? Is that in blah, blah, blah? Because obviously, I never, I'd done music at school, but my brain would turn off as soon as semi-quavers came up and I was only interested when it came to the practical. So for ages, I was always paranoid. Is this sounding right? Is this sounding right? But I think, like you said, sometimes when you don't think in boxes, that's when new sounds come up. That's when you develop your own sound. When you're constantly thinking in boxes, you're just reproducing what someone else has already done. Whereas sometimes, when you think outside those boxes, hence I've got very limited boxes, because of my limited music theory. I can sometimes go, okay, I can try that. And another thing is what I'd also put on top of that is, say if I've got a particular influence and I say, oh, I like that sound, but I am not musically gifted enough technically to to produce it, to reproduce it identically. Does that make sense? So through process, I'm trying to aim for it, but because of my limited um technical skills, I'll never reach it. But what I do end up reaching is that my own sort of sound. Does that make sense? Because I end up going, because I can only kind of got the ability of what I have. I make something that is authentically my own, if that makes sense. If that really makes sense.
No, it does make sense for sure, because like you can't necessarily copy that as it
I can't.
is. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like you've got your own version with the skill set that you do have and what you can
exactly.
hear.
Yeah,
If that
yeah,
makes
yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for you, like, as being an artist kind of like on your own almost, how do you collaborate with other musicians? Be good to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So mainly in Fat Jams, it's myself and obviously the lead vocalist Brendan Hill. So he's a big part of the sound. He's got that very unique voice, a unique way of delivering things. Um, but we've worked with a rapper called C Philly. So we've worked with him, who's an old school hip hop UK based artist. And then when it comes to recording with other artists, so the only other artists I'd say I've worked with are like session musicians. So a few string sections and whatnot. Again, one of the reasons I call it the Phat Jammerz is like everyone's jamming. Me and you are jamming now in this conversation. It's almost a back and forth. We're getting to know each other, and that's almost the same in the studio. So if I invite someone in, we're jamming. I want something they've got, so I'm kind of giving them, look, here's the tune. Let's kind of figure out where we're gonna go from here. So it's always about the teamwork, if that makes sense. Because there's no point me bringing in a violinist with 20 years experience and go, I want it played exactly like this, because they might have something better. But equally, I don't want her or him to come in and give me everything, because then I'm not doing anything. So it's always somewhere in between. Because I want to got to the idea by myself, and she or he want to get to the idea by themselves. So it's kind of like that, boom, and then that's when that sound is made.
Yeah, and then it can almost take a new form
You
on
can
that,
always
on
take
that
a new
point.
form.
And that's what happens when you have different people with different ideas
That's,
bouncing
yeah,
music or
exactly,
stuff off each other, because then the song can take on like a completely different meaning from the original idea. And
exactly.
that's what's so amazing about it.
And sometimes I agree with that point. Sometimes I remember, particularly this was making the first album. I found this a lot. Sometimes you just got to get out of the way of the song, if that makes sense. Sometimes your ego can be ahead of the song. The main priority when you're making a song is make that the best song ever. Because really that song is for the audience to enjoy. They've had a bad day, whatever, whatever it is. The song always takes priority. And sometimes you just got to get out of the way of the tune and not let your ego dictate the direction of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the less is more approach sometimes. It's like
Yeah,
just give the song what it needs and nothing more.
that's it. That's it. And sometimes you can, overcook it. I'm guilty of this. I mean, I can overcook it till it's like a black boiled egg, right? So that's the key, is to let the song lead the way sometimes.
Sure. So, if you're collaborating with all these musicians in your recordings, do you perform live with other musicians? How does that translate to like live performance, I guess would be my question.
As in the studio or live performance at gigs.
Yeah, so gigs, how do you take all those elements that you've recorded in the studio and then perform that live, or is it like a different thing entirely?
It'd be mostly a different thing. So it'd just be like we'd strip it down, more acoustic bass, really. Do you know what I mean? So we just, whatever we have available is what we do. So for me, the key of a good song is always, can you play it acoustically? Does it still sound good? That's how I know it's a good song. Um, so any song that we do play live, um, if it sounds good acoustically, then that's the main aim for us. And you always build on it. Bass will only add to it. Drums will only add to it. Keyboards will only add to it. Guitar will only add to it. But if from the basis it still sounds good, I think you're pretty much covered.
Makes sense. And what does your process look like for writing a song? Talk me through, like, does it always start with the same idea, the same melody to start with, or is it different for each song?
So usually I'll sit up. I'll open up a Logic project completely blank. I'll either play around with some drum beats, a few rhythm cycles until I'm kind of comfortable on. Then again, like I said, I'll pick a key, a mode, a set of scales. I'll just sit there for an hour. Okay, these are the set of chords you've got. These are the scales you've got, and I'll first I'll do the verse. So I'll just play around with a few chord progressions, boom, 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 and then the chord progressions sort of give me like a skeleton now, sort of like an emotional skeleton in which I can start pinning a melody to. So I've got the chord progression now, and now I'll just start with the piano. I'll just start playing melodies on the top of it, and eventually, hopefully, something snaps and something comes down, and I go, okay, that sounds decent. Okay, I've got a decent melody there. Now then I'll start humming it. I'll hum that melody, and then hopefully a line will just drop out of my head, and I'll just write it down. Now in my head, I sort of know what the track's about, and I'll start building lyrics from there. And then so from the verses done, and again, I'll just keep building all the way to get to all the way to the chorus. So then when I get to the verse, I need emotional change. When I get to the chorus, I need a build up. So it's all these similar, you know, principles, of tension, texture, build ups, release, sort of thing that I'm always experimenting with. And like 8 times out of 10, I produce pure shit. Do you know what I mean? It's maybe those 2 times out of 10, I've got something here. And then I'll phone up Brendan. Bum, 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 bum. Brendan, I think I've got an idea. Meet me at the studio. Vroom. And then we go there and we figure it out how he would sing it in his style. And then eventually we get there.
How do you kind of make that choice, I guess, between everything that you're creating and what ends up as like something that you're going to release?
Ooh, interesting question. Um, here's how I know. So when I'm at home and it's all abstract when I'm at home. If that makes sense. It's all MIDI. There's not really a vocal. I can't really sing, so it's all theoretical when I'm making it. When I've got the Logic project open, there's verse, bridge, chorus. There's MIDI bass going on, MIDI chords going on, MIDI brass going on. It's all hypothetical. I was like, I hope this does sound good. Then when I meet Brendan, I get him to sing it back to me without any MIDI, just him and a guitar singing it back to me. If I get if I feel the song's good, if I get a bit of goosebumps, I feel happy. That's when I know it's a song. When Brendan sings it back to me acoustically, just on his guitar, if I'm emotionally engaged in it, that's when I know it's a good song. Because previously then it's all theory. I've got a bunch of lyrics, I've got the melody, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to work into practice. That makes sense. It's all like you've got all the ingredients in the kitchen, but it's not until you taste it do you know if it's a go or not.
Yeah, you can almost get a vision at that point of like where the song could go
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like what the
exactly,
end product could be.
exactly.
Um, and how does like feedback from audiences that you play in front or people that listen to your music delve into that? That'll be an interesting thing to talk about. So, on the releases that you've put out so far,
Yeah.
what's been the feedback to date and how have you kind of dealt with that and taken it on?
I mean, the feedback has been fairly positive, but as independent artists, it's quite hard to reach mass audiences, if that makes sense. So I haven't really had mass feedback. I've had some stuff from close friends, close family, which I don't know how honest they'd be if I'm being honest with you. Do you know what I mean? Um, I've had a few people outside musicians who are a bit more critical, who still said fairly positive things. Again, I don't know how positive they are because they're saying it to my face. Do you know what I mean? Um, but one thing that I think some people do struggle with sometimes, only a few people, is how much I change genres. So I don't really have a particular set genre, if that makes sense. I'll play around with some jazz ideas here, some drum and bass ideas here, some reggae stuff here, some rock stuff there. So that was the only criticism I really sticks in my head, is that maybe I don't have a consistent sound. But like I said before, I've got musical ADHD. I get bored really quickly. So I'm like, I need new ideas.
Makes sense, but I guess like the challenge for you as an artist now is how do you define yourself as an artist
Yeah,
if you're going across all those genres?
yeah,
Because you might be across different genres, but there's also similarities in the sound, right? And like the
yeah.
process.
That's what I would say. I'd say the thing that glues it all together, in my opinion, is Brendan's voice. Once you hear that, it kind of makes a sound more familiar. It may be different instrumentations and arrangements, but really, once you hear his voice and the way he sings, I think it kind of all glues it together. Um, yeah,
That makes sense. And to be honest, that's enough of a point of difference. I haven't listened to it too much, but if he's got like a unique sound and a unique voice that's instantly something that you can recognize, then
yeah,
that's kind of like the clicking point that you define as your sound almost.
yeah, yeah, precisely. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other artists that done similar, like Queen, for example. You know, Bohemian Rhapsody. But Freddie's voice glues it all together, so it's a Queen track still. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, like we said, the process of actually creating the song is kind of similar. Like it's
Yeah,
those people collaborating together on that piece of
yeah,
music, even though it's got all these different genres kind of combined and like interweaving into the
yeah,
sound of the
exactly.
music,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So it'd be good to hear like now, like you've released some music. What's the future plan from here? Like, where do you see yourself going?
So we've got a few singles planned for this year. We've got one on the 14th coming out, and then one 2 weeks after that. I think we'll just keep plodding along, releasing singles, and you see where it takes us. Music's a very unpredictable thing, so you can't really. It's almost out of your hands whether it catches fire or not. It's sort of out of your hands. Um, so for me, I'm just gonna keep plodding along because it's a good creative outlet for me. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I have to do it. It's almost like an obligation, a deep obligation I find in myself to do. So I'll probably keep plodding along, but I can't really. The vision so far is sort of out of my hands, so I don't really know where we'll be in a year.
Makes sense. It's good to think about it though. Like, even if it's not like playing on the main stage at Glastonbury type
Yeah,
goal, it's more just like I want to keep creating and reaching more people and playing
yeah,
gigs to more audiences around the UK, for example.
exactly. Yeah,
It's kind of like quite an achievable thing to do. And I do say this to other people as well, like everyone's got their own niche
yeah,
within music, and it's just about like trying to find that audience that really love
exactly.
what you're doing,
Precisely.
and
Yeah,
appreciate it.
precisely. And sometimes that can take a lifetime to find that audience. Do you know what I mean? You're like, it's completely out your hands, or you know, no one really likes your stuff, which could be a possibility as well. Yeah, you may love it in your bedroom, but the reality is, it's really people are just like it's a bit shit. It's not for us.
And that's also like a different thing, like if the live experience is different to like what it is in the studio, then that's almost its own product again, right? Like,
Again, yeah,
you know,
and there's so many variables with creativity and art. It is ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people don't see them variables, and all those variables make a huge difference whether you make it or not. I'll say the word make it. I'll say it's like could it be your pay your bills, put food on your table? Do you know what I mean? Um, so many variables.
yeah. And I think like for most musicians, that's kind of like their minimum like goal. That it's not a case of like, they want to be a multi-millionaire. It's just like they want to be able to pay their bills and live off their music and just do what they
Yeah,
love all the time, right?
yeah, yeah. But like I said, it's hard, man. It is almost like winning the lottery ticket, making it any form of creativity, whether you're an actor, director, musician, no matter what it is. It's almost like a lottery ticket. Do you know what I mean? You either don't make it or you make it. There's no in between. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm an accountant. I can be an assistant accountant, director accountant, entry level accountant. You either make it or you don't. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
for sure. Yeah. There's so many different like levels to it, and I think like there's an element of natural talent for sure with
Yeah.
music, especially with vocals. Like you've either got a really good voice or you
Or
don't
you
a lot of
don't.
the
Yeah.
time. And then there is the training because you can improve in your craft and you can hone your
Oh, 100%.
songwriting. And then there's like we said, finding that audience. Um, but you can't just say like hard work's going to get you there in music because there's an element of luck to it. You could have like really crap music. You could like spend loads of money on advertising. You could have like a whole business model. You could do all that stuff and never get there.
I
Because at the end
mean,
of the day, like you can't outwork like a bad song.
that is the best. That's the best thing I've ever heard. You can't outwork a bad song. This is the truth. This is what I said to you before. If I hear it back acoustically, I remember Damien Albarn said it. There's not much you can do to fuck up a good track. If you got a good track, there's not much production more you can do to fuck it up. A good track is a good track. But having said that, when my dad used to run his record label, so it was an independent record label for Bangor artists and other world music artists as well. I used to see some really talented people, produce like really good music, but it's never went. So I grew up seeing these really good artists never make it, and they were talented, man. And I saw less talented people who didn't really know what a scale was or what make it. So again, it's not even necessarily down to sometimes talent. It's just that again, sometimes I don't know. It's I suppose if we all had the answer, we'd all be top of the pops, wouldn't we? We don't have the answer. That's the key here.
So I'm going to throw that back to you actually now. So for a musician starting out today,
Yeah,
drawing on your experience that you've had,
yeah,
what advice would you give them if they're trying to make it as a career? They're just picking up
yeah,
an
yeah, yeah,
instrument,
yeah.
they have the dream. What would you say to them?
So this is okay. To be fair, this is coming from me. I'm still trying to, figure it all out as well. Yeah, I wasn't like last time I checked. But what I would say is almost have this. If you can do music and be happy with earning zero money from it, getting zero followers, zero likes, zero listens, and you're still motivated to get up, stay up to 1 in the morning writing a tune, getting out your hard-earned pocket money to pay for studio time, to get it mastered, mixed, and you're still doing that with the expectation of having zero feedback, zero monetary value, then you're in it for the right reasons, right? And then you'll stick with it because sometimes you need a reason higher than any sort of materialistic sort of metric. Because it's a tough act making music for pretty much no money. So you have to almost be in it for the right reasons. Because if you're not, you'll give up fairly easily, in my opinion. You first release out, I've only got 10 views, I've only made £5. Forget it. Do you know what I mean? You almost have to be in it for the right reasons. And you have to accept the fact you might never make it. But if you still carry on getting up, working hard till 11 a.m., writing the tune, mixing, mastering, releasing it, having, accepted that, then I think for me, that's the key.
100%. It's kind of like loving the process of what you're doing, not the
Exactly.
result. And if it's something that you love to do, none of the other things should matter anyway, because you're doing
Exactly.
it for like the joy and
Exactly.
like the pure like passion for creation, right?
Exactly. But I think, I don't know, I've known some people to get into it for more the image, boost, oh, I'm an artist. I was like, mate, you can do it all you want, but no one in here knows who you are. And no one knows who I am either. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be in it for the right reasons, let your ego to a side, everything. And just again, like you said, for the creation.
Absolutely. So it's been great chatting today. We're nearly out of time. But is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with as we close out?
Yeah, just keep an eye on the Phat Jammerz if you can, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Instagram. We should be releasing a few singles this year. We've already got an album already out. So if you want to see what we're about and you want to digest that body of work, I think there's 11, 12 tracks on there. You can really delve into that and look out for the singles. Hopefully you enjoy.
Amazing. We'll put all the links in the description of the video below.
Great. You're a star. You
Nice
legend.
one. Really enjoyed it today.
Cheers, matey.
Nice one. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.